John Barclay and welcome to the Fatality Free Future podcast.
Hello, my name is Holly Ferguson. This is the podcast where we explore the challenges and possibilities of creating a fatality-free future. Once again, we have found ourselves at the end of a season. Season 2, we are done and dusted after this episode.
Yeah, that's gone quickly. It's been good. It's been an enjoyable journey this season with some different guests coming in, so it's been good.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed having the range of experts we've had in and all the topics we've covered this season. And season 3, just giving, a little heads up to our listeners, is going to be even better, and we've got great plans for that as well. But to wrap up this episode or this season, we want to dive into a topic that contains many topics. I'm thinking about the noise that's in the safety space at the moment. There's so many principles, so many different approaches. We see it all the time on LinkedIn. New view safety, HOP safety, safety differently, safety 1, safety 2. There's a lot out there.
There's a lot. Yeah, and I think from my perspective, there's a need for us to really start thinking about how we engage organisations. And I think having these different processes, different principles coming to light in different ways is helpful in a way, in that it's really giving an opportunity to connect with people who may have been struggling to connect. So I think there's a lot of different perspectives out there, and I think the main concern I have early on in this process is I think it is starting to create a little bit of confusion. I think it's starting to confuse people around what they should be doing or what principles they could be getting into. So there's a lot out there, and there's lots of different principles out there being spoken about, and looking forward to just, I guess, in this session, just having a bit of a chat about some things to think about when it comes to different approaches.
As I said, there's a lot of noise in this space, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. No. There are benefits and challenges to all of these things, and I think that's what we can unpack a little bit. Do you think there's a commonality between all of these different principles and approaches?
I think at the core, there's lots of things to address in safety. There's the risk management side, there's the system side, but there's also the culture side. And again, I'm sure in the current conversations, there's debates about how to talk about culture and how to think about that. But I think fundamentally all these new structured principles and processes like HOP and New View and safety differently and everything, I think fundamentally is trying to help address the complexity of culture. I think that, because culture is really, I use a definition. Again, you can go technically and look at many definitions of culture, but I try and stick to a fundamental that culture is just a shared beliefs, values and normalised behaviours within a group. Mm-hmm. So I try and stick to that as the way for me to think about it. So all these different approaches, I think, are helping align groups to a specific belief process, which is then probably helping shape some values you put around something, and therefore then try to normalise some behaviours that are hopefully quite helpful in the ultimate goal of trying to help people stay safe at work. So I think fundamentally they're all trying to address culture in their own way, even though they probably don't always call that out as a specific focus. Because at the end of the day, we talk about it all the time, that culture eats systems for breakfast. So you can have the best systems, you can have the best processes, but if there's not really clearly aligned beliefs and values and normalised behaviours that support the evolution of that system and the application of those systems, then you tend to not get the results or the performance that you're hoping to get through that. And what I do like about what's happening in this space is we are trying to be creative and innovative around how to engage different people with different backgrounds, with different perspectives around safety in the safety intent of trying to keep people safe. And I just think it does give us a little bit more option on how to talk about safety to shape some beliefs around how we should be approaching it.
When it comes down to it, we are creating these new principles and approaches essentially to just try and engage people and see what sticks.
Yeah, I don't want to undermine some of the stuff that's happening out there, but yeah, I think it's a bit of a branding exercise, because while I use the term new and innovative, the foundations of what's being brought in there is really not that new. So I'll sort of lean into some of the common stuff that's been sitting around, which is HOP and the principles around HOP, because they sort of move their way through into New View and safety differently and safety too. So the HOP sort of seems to be the main one that's gravitated to these 5 key principles. So error is normal. So again, if we're talking about human error is a normal thing, then that's not new. So we've been talking about failing safe and how to create capacity and capability within systems to absorb error and mistakes. And that's been around in process safety since the 60s and 70s, and then moving through traditional day-to-day safety practices in the 80s, 90s and 2000s. So while it's not new, I think it's been positioned in a way that's a lot better for people to try and understand its intention and what it's really trying to get people to understand. But again, it's not new. Failing safe and capacity to absorb failure has been around for a while. The other ones, blame doesn't fix anything, right? So, again, it depends how you describe blame is where I'll go there. And there's lots of, once that principle comes out in debate, everyone will talk about blame, because I think we hold blame and accountability together, and they can be subtly different. But again, blame, we know, hinders learning, because once people feel like they're going to be blamed and fault focused, it creates a bit of fear. People then get defensive. People then generally hold back information, lowers trust, which we all know is really important in the concepts as well. But again, blame as a non-focus isn't new either. So when I first started my journey in safety back in the early 90s, the fundamental principle was no name, no blame. So that had been around for a long time as well. It's not about the person, it's about the work practices, it's about the shared beliefs, it's about the shared values and the normalised behaviours. So I do take a behavioural approach to things, and I know some people don't necessarily associate focusing on behaviour, but I don't see behaviour as a good or a bad thing, and I don't see behaviour as a blame orientated thing. I see behaviour, and there's different people who express this really well, and I do recognise that Clive Lloyd even expresses this really well, that behaviour is not the problem, it's an expression of the problem. But again, that's been around for a long time, that behaviour is just the observable action. I can see the behaviour, but it helps me then work out, what do I need to learn? So if that behaviour is not in line with keeping people doing work in a way that's safe as possible, then I want to understand that it's not about blame, it's not about the person, it's about trying to sample the way work's been done. Then learning is vital. So that's another principle that's been well focused on, and I like it. It's something that sat with me and resonated with me for a long time, because focusing on learning from normal work hasn't always been a great asset for safety. Safety's generally spent most of its effort investigating incidents, so generally using after the fact as its focal point, where I think trying to create a culture where we can go and look at work as being done, work as done, we can start to understand what's normal and we can learn from that, right? So I think learning is vital, is helping, that rebranding is helping people understand what does that really mean. And again, nothing really new. We've gone out and looked at work. I mean, I was going out and engaging crews in the early 90s to talk to them about how work was done. How's work been done? What's easy for them to do? What are their challenges? What makes it difficult? It's not new, but I think it's just been restructured and rebranded in a way that it's starting to make sense to people. Then the fourth one around context drives behaviour. I find this one really intriguing, because you probably hear we talk about this a lot, right? That sometimes the controls or the behaviours we're asking people to do around doing work can be either enabled, difficult or impossible, right? So context drives behaviour. If it's a difficult thing to do, people aren't always going to follow through in the way that we want them to do it. If it's not possible to do, if it's unworkable, if it's impossible, well, they're not going to do it. They're going to find alternative ways to do the work. So context drives behaviour. Also the environment that we put them in. David Wallace shared a great image on LinkedIn once of a train here in Perth with the button you pressed open the door, and right above it's an emergency button. So I wonder how often people get those things mixed up. So environmentally, context drives behaviour as well. So again, nothing new. We've generally worked with people to understand what makes their job difficult. We've generally looked at it from a root cause point of view or a causation point of view. James Reason with his approach to the Swiss cheese model, again, was trying to unpack a bit of that as well. So it's nothing new. I think it's just been talked about differently, and it's helping people think about that. And the final one around response matters. First thing I was taught as a leader when I became a supervisor was making sure you understand how to respond, not react, right? So I learnt reaction was emotional. It was generally unthoughtful. It generally created more complexity or even conflict in what you're doing. And again, I'm human. I still get into moments where I react to things and I know they don't go well. So learning to respond allows us to show calmness, shows intention, allows us to be curious, allows us to step into learning a lot more effectively. And it probably encourages people that it's safe to speak up, it's safe to raise a concern, maybe report an issue, those sorts of things. So when we look at just those 5 principles, which are really, really fundamental, there's really nothing new about them. And I think that's the part for me has been confusing over the last sort of decade or two as these principles are being focused on. Is they're nothing new, they're not groundbreaking, but they have just been spoken about differently.
Oh, you see that with so many trends. They all come back around, right?
Yeah, they do.
We find new ways to repackage the same stuff. But when there are so many options available, is that confusing for people? They go, which one do I know to follow? How do I make that decision?
Yeah, look, I think that's what I'm starting to hear when I'm talking to our clients and talking to leaders around things. It's so vocal, it's so present. All these different principles are being spoken about. I think fundamentally it has created choice. It has created an opportunity to choose how you go about engaging your organisation and your people about safety. But I think it's created some confusion because ultimately people still think quite literally. There is still some fixed mindset around things. Things are right, things are wrong, things are good, things are bad. Some things are better than others. So I think when there's still that fundamental human factor in some things are right, some things are wrong, I think that's what's confusing people here. There's lots of different principles with the same fundamental design around them, fundamental principles around them, but being talked about differently. I think it is confusing people. I think what confusion does for people. So if you go to a store, you're there to buy a product and there's 2 different versions of it, we can generally make a choice pretty quickly around where our preference goes. But if you turn up to buy a product and there's 50 different varieties of it, human behaviour shows in sales processes we actually don't buy.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We actually don't buy. There's too much choice and we can't make a decision, so we end up not buying. So if we were to think about this as a cultural engagement strategy, what we're actually asking people to do is to buy in to a way of doing something. And if it's too confusing, if there's too many options and I can't make decisions, people just then not opt to do anything differently. They just go with the same thing I've been doing because I don't know which way to go, so I just don't make a decision and then I just keep doing what I'm doing.
And if you have a client that starts speaking to you about these different principles and maybe wants your advice on should I be following one of these, what kind of advice do you give in that space?
My main bit of advice is be clear on what your current challenges are, like actually understand what it is you're dealing with. You don't need to fix something that's not broken. So I think sometimes we've got to take stock of what's happening now and don't feel like you have to do something for the sake of doing something. All these principles that I just spoke through before do show up in slightly different ways and can be applied in subtly different ways. So you may be doing these things already but not using the language that you're hearing from some of these different principles and different ways of talking about things. So I think that's the first place to start, is really be clear on what your problem is and what it is you're trying to solve, and then be really clear on what's the future state, what is it you want to achieve, and what's going to be the best way to get you there. Is it HOP? Is it New View? Is it behavioural science? Whatever it is, what is it you want to address and what's going to be your best approach to it. But saying that too, I just want to say to anyone out there that's going on a change journey, don't keep chopping and changing your journey. Just stick to whatever you choose to do, whether it's HOP or anything else to support your strategy. Stick with it. Yeah. Learn as you go, adjust your little subtleties within the process, but don't keep changing course. I think keep changing course confuses the organisation and you don't get anywhere.
Would you say people could maybe pick and mix from different principles and approaches, or is that just creating more noise and confusion?
No, look, I think if it's packaged up in a good change strategy, I think, if you're sort of picking a few bits out of HOP and a few bits out of New View and safety differently, if you're sort of picking, because really all we're talking about is some difference in language and some subtle differences in execution application. So I think if you're going to choose bits and pieces that gravitate to what you want to do, as long as that's packaged up as a process rather than been, trying this for this and doing this for that, and then they conflict with each other. I think just make sure that they're working together, build it as a strategy on its own. So sometimes you might build these things up together and create your own. So that's what a lot of these people have done around these. They've gone and grabbed principles that have made sense and packaged them up as HOP and packaged them up as New View, packaged them up. So if you want to do that in your organisation, go for it. Just make sure it's packaged up properly and make sure it's got a clear change strategy, implementation strategy, communication strategy, and stay with it. Just learn as you go.
If none of these principles resonate with someone, what do we do then?
Look, I think it goes to the fundamental part of safety. There's some foundational concepts in safety, regardless of what new view you take on it, is stick with that. Like, fundamentally make sure you're really good at identifying hazards and energy sources in your business that have the potential to hurt people. Really assess those well. Get an understanding of them. Get an understanding of how they exist and how they present in the workplace. Make sure you've clearly identified and practiced your controls, and make sure you've really got a good, healthy routine to verify that all that's working. And just make sure when you're doing that, you consult with people, the people who are doing the work, people who are involved in the work, or subject matter experts like engineers and those sorts of things who understand the complexities of certain energies. Then again, make sure you're consulting really well and make sure that you've got the right leaders involved and committed to making sure that process works well. So those are out there. Well, I'm probably talking about the fundamentals of safety 1, right? So how safety originally started. But that fundamental risk management structure is the most important thing to get right. All these other things, other principles out there, are probably different ways to think about your consultation and engagement process and leadership commitment, which, again, you can do that in many different ways.
Wrapping up, John, do you have any final bits of advice for people navigating this space?
I think stay curious. Don't be closed-minded. While I don't always agree with the way everyone's talking about safety in this space, I deliberately avoid trying to shut it down, because I do want to listen and I do want to hear and I do want to seek to understand where it's coming from. So I think for everyone out there who's listening to all the noise in this space, and safety is becoming quite loud and quite noisy, I think just be curious, listen to it. Don't feel like you have to do all of it. Don't feel like you have to do any of it. Just have a bit of an understanding of what's going on in your work context, in your organisational context. Talk to people, ask questions, be curious, listen to what others are saying. And if there's anything in the safety space that's been spoken about in these rooms that you think is going to be helpful, then go and explore it a bit. Try and understand what it is. How would you apply it? What would it look like? Maybe talk to a few people internally who are key influencers and explore the concept with them and see if it makes sense to them. Because fundamentally, all you're trying to do is give people a decision point on how we're going to improve. And that's my biggest bit of advice for people, is don't be closed-minded. Look at it, listen to it, find a way how it might fit. And if it doesn't fit, then move on.
Great advice as always, John. Very diplomatic. Very level-headed.
Yeah, thank you. And look, hopefully everyone's enjoyed season 2, and I'm really looking forward to season 3.
Likewise. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fatality Free Future podcast. Head to our Fatality Free Future hub on barclays.com for more information and to access everything we spoke about in this episode.